Hi, it's Stephen Shalowitz here from the One Way Ticket Show. I'm excited to announce our new YouTube channel where we're taking some of our classic episodes and releasing new ones as well. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel on YouTube, and also when you're there, ring that bell so you never miss an episode.
From New York City, I'm Stephen Shalowitz, and this is the One Way Ticket Show. I am super excited to have talk show host and author Dick Cavett return for his second session here on the One Way Ticket Show. And just in case you need to be reminded, Dick's more than half-century career in the entertainment industry has included writing for the likes of Jack Parr, Johnny Carson, and Merv Griffin. He was the host of the highly regarded The Dick Cavett Show on ABC and PBS, and also hosted talk shows on the USA, HBO, and CNBC cable networks, where he interviewed too long a list of luminaries for me to even go into right now. He appears frequently on stage, screen, and new media, and was nominated for his most recent Emmy Award in 2012. Dick writes an online opinion column for the New York Times and is the author of Talk Show and co-author of Cavett and Eye on Cavett, and his latest book is Brief Encounters, and it's now available in paperback. I highly recommend it. And with that,
wow,
I'd like to...
Folks, he did that all from memory. That's
what can I say? I take my omega-3s, Dick. And with that, I'd like to welcome back on the One Way Ticket Show Nebraska's gold medal pommel horse state gymnastics champion, the one and only Dick Cavett. Welcome back, Dick.
Thank you for mentioning the thing I'm proudest of.
You did a triple rear dismount.
You know everything.
And I'm wondering if you've tried that trick anytime in the recent past?
I might have been able to do it on a chair. No, you can't possibly. That's a sad story in a way. The pommel horse this is just a fact, not an opinion, the hardest piece of apparatus in gymnastics, most difficult. It's not the showiest by any means, the rings and the bars and all that stuff. But when my gymnastics team tried to get started in Lincoln High School in Lincoln, Nebraska, they only had tumbling mats and a horse. You got up at 6 every morning, came to school early, worked the horse for an hour. Then we got other apparatus, but I thought I put all this damn time in on the horse, and it paid off in that sense. I could probably get into beginning position mounting the horse. But yes, your research or memory is great. The triple rear dismount stunned the judges. And it is so easy to blow. And the thought of working a year for any gym, any athlete, and going out and possibly falling off the apparatus, and it happens all the time. There haven't been many suicides from it, but...
Listen, Dick, once again, we just really want to welcome you back. And I'd like actually to start our conversation today by exploring your one-way ticket destination, which is pretty much where we left off last time. We ran out of time, lots of topics to discover the last time. And so I just want to remind our listeners that your one-way ticket destination was to talk throughout eternity with Oscar Wilde, either at the Savoy Hotel in London dining room or his favorite club. And when I started thinking about that answer, I was actually quite surprised because you're such a New Yorker.
Yeah.
And for you to leave New York, you never went to L.A.,
right,
as many people in the entertainment industry did.
I would go for 2 weeks each year, that's all.
To L.A.,
yeah,
and that was enough.
And let me quickly insert that the great John Cheever on a show of mine had just come back from Hollywood and Los Angeles. I said, "Do you like it out there?" He said, "When I'm there, when the alarm goes off in the morning, I have to get up and go straight to the shower to keep from hanging myself." That's pretty much
was
my
2 weeks
feeling.
was 2 weeks about enough for you out in L.A. then?
Yeah, but it was fun because I was doing shows then, and actually I lived there for 6 months, and I didn't hate it the way New Yorkers are supposed to. I had a pretty good time.
Well, it's nice weather, but what about London? Could you really conceive of leaving New York for a place like London?
For eternity.
For eternity.
Yeah, I might do it for half of eternity, and then I might start dreaming that the old stage delicatessen still existed and I could get a corned beef on rye without the waiter, without saying I want mayonnaise on it.
But you must have spent a lot of time in London.
I have been there a number
fair
of
amount
times.
of time.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I did ask for mayonnaise once at the stage.
Did they kick you out?
No, but the waiter yells to another writer, "Ay, Gewalt, mayonnaise he wants." And
Get
then
him out of
Gavalt
here.
started laughing too, so I figured that's part from my old nightclub act.
Shit,
You
but-
can
but-
tell material when you hear it.
That's okay. But it's always good to recycle, right? But would you miss a good deli if you went to
I
London?
would,
And
yes.
what else would you miss then?
Yeah, I'd miss reading about how the cholesterol from the food was bad for me, but
But now there are all the health warnings here in New York City.
I know there's so little one can eat anymore. There are people living on soy milk and nothing else. They don't look so good. My God, I got a saw. Oh, Oscar Wilde. Yeah, I'm laboring to write a piece for the Times online thing about Gore Vidal, as distinct from Gore Schwartz or Gore O'Hara.
Or Al Gore.
Or Al Gore, yeah. Speaking of wits. And there's so much, I know so much about him, there's so much to say that I can't get it down to,
Just one sentence.
or even down to 1,500 words, which is considered a little
Right.
long.
But
for
would you
such
miss a
book.
good bagel here from
Miss
here?
a good bagel now.
You do?
Yeah, some
If-
shows
had I
have
kno-
them ready for you.
Yeah, I know. Had
Yeah.
I known you didn't have breakfast, Dick, I would have gone to Essa Bagel on 51st and 3rd.
Assa?
Essa, eat,
Spell it.
like the ESSA.
Oh,
Essa Bagel. Oh, you're a German speaker.
Ass a bagel,
No,
which was some kind of inside Yiddish joke that I don't know about.
no, Essa Bagel. at
Yeah.
51st and 3rd.
Thank you.
Me,
They
yes.
thank you, and I thank you.
We got to give him a plug there.
Could I go now? I'm really.
No, we have about 40 minutes before your
Okay,
car
go
comes, so
You could
I'll have
order
one.
out, though,
I
you
can
know.
order out, and we'll have it
Right,
sent
a classy
in.
show.
Hey, listen, we sprung for the coffee and the water. It's just like prison, right? We'll
You
give
mean
you.
you sprang for them?
Thank you for correcting
That's
me.
the most common mistake, and my father, the English teacher, used to catch me on it all the time.
So we
and
sprang.
You see it every day. He sunk the ship. No, he sank.
Sank the ship.
Yeah, but I'm not. Who am I?
Grammar
to
lesson
tell
101.
Shawartz how to speak.
Listen, you wouldn't be the first one.
My dad would always say, I'd say, "Oh, our dog's laying out in the yard." He'd say, "He's what?" "He's laying out in the yard." "And who or what is under him?" And then I finally got it. If you said Uncle Bill was laying in the yard, I'd believe it.
It would be,
A major critic recently said that somebody screamed inchoately. That would take quite an actor in the movie being reviewed.
yes,
I've never seen anyone scream inchoately.
yes. Now,
In
I
Chicago, yes.
yes,
Never mind. That
where I
sounds
just
like
came back from,
bad
which we'll
fun.
which
I
we'll
knew
talk
that.
about.
I know these things.
You've done your research
You're not
too.
the only one who's prepared.
Who's prepared? So I got to ask you today, and this is totally unplanned.
Yeah.
Is December 1st, and it happens to be as we record this. We're going to be airing this in about 2 weeks. It's your old pal Woody Allen's birthday. It's his 80th birthday today.
Aujourd'hui, how do you say in English? Today?
Today is Woody Allen's 80th birthday. So, talking about,
Didn't get him anything.
you still have a few hours.
How about us
How about
a
we
bagel
go?
of one of the bagel?
How about you and I go pick up some bagels and drive them over there?
I think he's out in the West Coast repairing a movie that he's making.
We'll have them FedExed.
Had to change some stuff around.
Would you like to take Woody Allen with you on your one-way ticket journey
Oh, absolutely.
to have a conversation for eternity with Oscar Wilde? And would you take anyone else?
I might take Gore Vidal and see the two of them because it's often been said about Gore's brilliant, articulate, witty conversation that's effortless and endless that it's probably the closest we will ever come to knowing what it was like to hear Oscar Wilde in conversation. And people trying to describe it, contemporaries like Max Beerbohm and Shaw, describe Wilde's conversation, said it was like a great crystal fountain of words that blossomed into the air. So mixed metaphor there. I don't know if a fountain blossoms, but
You get the picture. Do you think Woody could get a film out of this?
I don't know what he could not get a film out of. There was a night many and many a year ago in a kingdom by the sea when, well, that's Poe, folks, when we were sitting in Trader Vic's in Los Angeles. Woody was playing a nightclub at the beginning of his painful nightclub career for him. And he said, we ordered a lobster, and he said, Cavett, I really want to make movies. And I thought anybody could say that. The thing that astounded me most, here he was, a virtually unknown nightclub comic, but splendid credits as a writer by that time. He said, I have so many ideas for movies. And I thought, this guy, my new friend, thinks he can make a movie. I wouldn't know how to think up a movie if I were given a year and plenty to eat.
They just keep on coming.
Well, 40 movies later, he can still think of any
What's
number.
What's his secret sauce, Dick?
I wish I knew how he did it.
And does he know how he does it?
I don't think so. I think maybe his flunking out of NYU is probably one of the things that he attributes his success to.
It probably drove him. Really.
Yeah.
So anyway, just to wind down our one-way ticket conversation then before we move on to other things.
Go ahead.
Would you take anything with you from New York? And anything that you'd like to show Oscar Wilde to London?
To living till the end of time and beyond.
Yes.
In London. I'd take my current dog and wife. That's the kind of remark that made Lily Tomlin walk off my show once. Not because I made the remark, but shall I go on with this?
Please.
Somebody said, you've had 2 walk-offs that I can think of, and somebody else said a third. The first, of course, was the spectacular racist governor of Georgia, Lester Maddox. I refused to apologize to him, and he hauled what's the name of the deli place with S&A?
Oh, Essa Bagel?
That's what I was referring to.
Yes.
Anyway, Chad Everett. Remember him?
He did that medical...
Star of one of those shows.
The medical show in the late 60s, early 70s, I think.
Chad was an amiable fellow, nice guy. You might say that S.J. Perelman said about the heads of studios in Hollywood, he said about them they had 4 heads by dint of electrolysis. Think of the Wolfman. Chad was a nice guy. I had another fellow on sitting beside him named Wystan Hugh, or W.H. Auden. Chad announced that he too was a poet. He had a poem published in Pageant or somewhere. At one point he threw his arm around Auden and said to me, you don't understand, we poets. The other great quote from that show, as I said something to me, he turned to Auden and said, do you work from life or what? Now that belongs in Bartlett's quotation.
Exactly, that's quite odd.
Anyway, then he said, somebody said, what do you value so much? And he said, my horse and my wife, they're my 2 greatest possessions. This sent Lily right into the wings.
Because of the word possession.
Even if possession, yeah. Not that the wife got second billing, which might have contributed to it, but that was one. Did I slide way off your question?
No, not at all, because I was just going to round out our one-way ticket journey with you and ask you if you were a big Gilbert and Sullivan fan, given the history of the Savoy Hotel.
Oh, yeah, the Savoyards and so forth. Yeah,
right, because D'Oyly Carte built the Savoy Theater, and he was the one that really put Gilbert and Sullivan on the map, and of course the Gilbert and Sullivan musicals were at the Savoy Theater, and then he built the Savoy Hotel.
Film about Gilbert and Sullivan that came out about 8 or 9 years ago. Oh, it's wonderful. I've seen it 3 times at least. Someone will call in and tell us if we had a phone.
Or my brother, because he's a big Gilbert and Sullivan fan.
It's so funny that you should strike upon this subject, because at about age 8, somebody gave me or my folks an album of 3 disc records, the old Nelson Eddy sings Gilbert and Sullivan. And there was the Mikado's song and the Nightmare song and When I Was a Lad, and it's all these long, intricate patter songs. And within 2 weeks, I'm told, I knew them all and was asked to sing them when company came over. Thank God one of the company wasn't W.C. Fields. Can you imagine how this little tyke standing up in a chair singing Gilbert and Sullivan.
Can
I
you
was a
still
little older than that,
Can
but
you
I
still sing any of it?
Yeah, I can sing them all for you.
Would
How
you-
long do you have?
Oh, just a verse of your favorite Gilbert and Sullivan music. Which is your favorite?
I don't really have a favorite. I do the Nightmare song because it's difficult and strange lyrics.
Would you like to give us a little bit of that?
Could I do it next time? I'll probably blank on
Got a
it now.
deal.
Started that morning from Devon. He's a bit undersized, and you'll feel surprised when he tells you he's only 11. Well, you're driving like mad with the singular lad by the ship's now a four-wheeler, and you're playing round games, and he calls you bad names, and he tells you that ties pay the dealer, and this you can't stand, and you throw up your hand, and you find her as cold as an icicle. And he and the crew are something too, while it's on Salisbury Plain on a bicycle. And it goes on and on. It's just fun to sing the stuff. In the end of it, he awakens from the nightmare, and it goes, let's see, and then something's wrong in the morning. You're a regular wreck with a crick in your neck, and no wonder you snore if your head's on the floor, and you've needles and pins from your soles to your shins, and your flesh is a creep in the left leg to sleep, and a fly on your nose, and a fly on your toes, and a something sense that you haven't been sleeping in clover. But the darkness is past, and it's daylight at last. And something about the end of the song and the dream, and people clapped, as you just did. I'm told that when I was 3 and 4, my mother would stand me up in the back of an easy chair, and I would recite yards of poetry for the company, part of which was, at the end, I would say, now everybody crap. I had trouble with L.
Well, Dick, I wanted to ask you about poetry.
Yeah.
Because you're a man of many talents, and that's one talent that I really admire about you is the ability to remember and recite poetry and to have such a facility with poems. And I'm wondering what you make of the state of poetry in the United States today. Because to give the MTA credit down in the subway, oftentimes they'll have poems by people from the 1900s or Maya Angelou or people today, et cetera. And I have to give them a lot of credit for that, for trying to up the game of poetry.
Yes.
But I really wish that there was a little bit more of poetry awareness in the country today, and I'm just wondering what you make of
Well, I tried
poetry.
to have every
with it.
kind of person in various fields on the show. That's why you will find that I had both W.H. Auden and Rod McEwen. Do anybody remember Rod McEwen? Poet of the 70s.
I don't, actually.
His poetry was rather simple, shall we say, but hugely popular. I introduced him as the most understood poet in America. Fortunately, he might not have gotten it, or I didn't hear it because he was standing in the wings. And everybody made fun of him, so I thought, why not join in, like kicking the kid on the playground that other people are kicking. And my last line of the introduction was, as sure as moon doth rhyme with June, here in the flesh is Rod McEwen. But he was perfectly amiable. He seems to have vanished from the scene. Who was the Russian, the pretentious Russian poet? He was such a posturing ass. And he came on and, with great gestures out of 19th century acting, did this poem. He was quite well known at the time, and the audience applauded. And then the actor Robert Shaw came out.
That must have been wonderful.
He said, before we get to anything else, that is the most preposterous, boring, pretentious, overblown piece of performing I have ever seen in any medium.
It's funny, poetry in other countries, I think, is held in a higher regard than it is here in the United States. In Russia, for example,
God, yes.
I went to Iran in 2007, and before I went, people said you can even ask taxi drivers to recite Rumi and Sadi and the great Persian poets. And it has such an indelible mark in a place like Iran and in some other countries, but it doesn't really
Funny
here.
You should strike this. Once when I was on the Pyramid show, I loved going on the Pyramid show. And it seems like I'm told half of my Pyramid appearances are now on YouTube. But I remember thinking they'd have subjects like baseball players, and someone would say, Yogi Berra, baseball players? Yeah. But they were all in a way where I remember thinking if you put poets, the person would probably go blank. Or they might remember the village smithy or Roses Are Red.
But they won't remember necessarily who wrote them. But I think did people in the United States, say, for example, when you were growing up, did poetry have more prominence? And I remember hearing Peggy Noonan, whom I love, who I think is a wonderful writer, and she wrote, of course, Reagan's speeches, and she talked about, she just came out with a new book, so she's been doing the circuit. I'd love to actually have her on the show. And she talked about when she wrote the famous speech for Reagan after the Challenger disaster.
Yes.
And she featured the line,
Touch the
slip
face
the
of
surly
God.
bonds of earth to touch the face of God, which came from a poem.
And Reagan got away with, for many people, with thinking, gee, isn't that a nice phrase he or his speechwriter came up with?
But he knew that it was from a poem.
Nobody credited the real author.
Do you know who I don't know who the real author is, actually.
His name is a rather commonish sounding name, but he was a pilot. I don't know whether he couldn't get in the Air Force here, so he did in Canada, and he wrote that terrific poem not long before being shot down and killed. So he has a certain immortality, but it's true. Any country probably knows more poetry than America.
And it's
no offense, Donald Trump, but
or any of the candidates, actually, because the thing is that I'm trying to think of something, shall we say, rather highbrow today that everybody would know, and I really can't think of anything.
some people remember the old Wrigley jingles from radio and things, but Burma Shave poems. But I remember reading something you just jogged my memory on. Somebody said, what test would you devise and put in a question that would stump virtually everyone and give it to, let's say, our congressmen, all of them? And he said, I have it right now. Quote any 2 consecutive lines of a modern poem.
There you go. There you go.
Now I got to add this. Some poet, not many years ago, reviewing a book in the New York Times about poetry, said the truest thing you can say about poets' lives is that writing a book of poems and expecting a reaction is like dropping a rose petal down a well and waiting for the splash.
Oh.
That's chilling.
Isn't it? That's beautiful,
Yeah.
actually. Just real briefly, I love Japanese poetry in haiku, and I know you've just come back from Japan. Yes. So I just want to ask you real briefly, how was your trip to Japan?
それはyou made this sugoi. That's street Japanese for fabulous, as you probably know. I hate to name drop on you.
But go for it, Dick.
I once made Princess Michiko, now the Empress of Japan, laugh when she complimented me on my Japanese, as every Japanese will, no matter how you spit and splat it out and get it wrong.
What was the context? I have to ask you, what was the context there?
Jozu desu ne, you are so skillful. That's the excessive Japanese politeness that, in a way, the great Donald Ritchie, who lived there 62 years, said, that politeness is, of course, a way of distancing you. But she said, how much Japanese do you know? It was at the Japan Society in New York.
When was this?
Hang out there. Oh, God, this probably was 15 years ago. And I said, Watashi no Nihongo wa George Bush daitorio yori jozu da to omoimasu. Did you get that?
I did not get that. I have to have my pocket translator on.
I said my Japanese is slightly better than President George Bush's Japanese, and she laughed. The Empress laughed. I got an Imperial laugh.
How great is that? Speaking of Japan, I'm a bit old school, and I like to cut out things from the New York Times rather than, and I like to read.
Really?
I like to read a newspaper rather than read it online. And
You're a clipper.
I'm a clipper. I don't know if you are or not, but I am a clipper. The last time we talked, you had mentioned that there were Japanese families in Nebraska when you were growing up.
I was knocked over.
Okay, but what I have to tell you is, so this is the article that I clipped out, which I have cue sound effect for rustling paper here.
Yeah, it's a real prop.
It's a real prop, as my favorite high school teacher would call it, a visual aid. And it says, Ben Kuroki dies at 98, fought bias to fight for U.S., and he was a decorated Japanese-American gunner in the Army Air Force of World War II, it says here, who was hailed on the American homeland at a time when tens of thousands of Japanese Americans were confined to the internment camps. And then it goes on. He was 98 years old. But then the article went on to say, Mr. Kuroki, who was born and raised in
Brazuca.
So I'm going to give this to you.
Oh, good.
And the next time you go back to Nebraska, it came from the September 6th
Oh, great. I'm glad
New
to have
York
this.
Times.
I'd
So I'm
love-
feeling like next time you go back to Nebraska, you can see about finding his family.
I know that your credulity is hard to stretch, but I met him when I was in high school. Ben Kroki, Japanese reverse, spoke at my high school. And as I've got to stop inelegantly putting it, I've been queer for Japan since I was 5 years old. And people say, why then? And I'll say, I remember my mother coming out into the yard on a fateful Sunday afternoon and saying, you little kids, come in and listen to this. It's on the radio. You won't understand it. But the Japs have gotten us into the war. And I didn't know who the Japs were or where the war was. And I certainly didn't know who Pearl Harbor was, though we had a Pearl Winslow living next door. So I love Japan, and I love going there, and I have an affinity for it, but it's spooky. When I would check everything on Japan out of the Grand Island, Nebraska Public Library, there would be books called Modern Japan from 1912. But when I saw the Meiji Jingu and other shrines and the old fading photographs, and I don't want to go too far with this, I felt I knew them somehow. Now, Shirley MacLaine could probably help me with this, but I really did. And when I got there, I felt I'm home in a strange way. I don't know what this is called in psychology or abnormal psychology.
Dick, I have to tell you, when I was growing up, it was before China really opened up. And I would look in the Old World Book Encyclopedia at all the black and white photos of China that were in there. And there was something that just drew me to China. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I got there, I had the same feeling like I was home.
Now, what's interesting about it with me and you is that China didn't do it for me, but Japan did. And so when I went to Chinatown in Chicago as a kid when we visited there were streets with kanji characters instead of English. And I thought, I pretended I was in Japan. I don't know what the difference could be. Even the architectures. Oh, that reminds me. Do you want to hear the dumbest thing ever said on a talk show?
Yes.
Maybe you already know it. An American singer, female as it happened, had just come back from Nippon. And she said to Johnny, you don't remember Mr. Carson?
Of course.
Oh, Johnny, you've got to go to Japan. They've got an architecture that won't quit. Won't quit, eh?
Do you care to say who said that?
I probably won't, because she'd be, if she has any brains at all, which there's not much evidence of, she'd be horribly embarrassed to know that she said the dumbest thing I ever heard of, ever said on a talk show. Architecture that won't quit.
I love that. Listen, Dick, don't go anywhere. We're going to tie you to your chair right there. We're going to take a short break, and then when we return, I've got some audience questions for you.
They're tying
which is
me
always
too tight
fun.
Here.
Okay, we'll let it loose. I'm Stephen Chalowitz. We'll have more with Dick Cavett, so stay right where you are.
It's the most advanced technology available. Engineered with over 200 million sensory receptors. Its all-terrain design is beautifully formed, weather-resistant, reliable, astonishingly high performance in even the most challenging of circumstances. And it is also the finest search technology in the world. There's nothing else quite like a search dog. Be part of the search. Go to searchdogfoundation.org to see how you can help.
When I grow up, I want to be a new pair of blue jeans.
When I grow up, I want to be a kid's first computer.
I want to be a warm fleece on a play.
I want a football
I want to be
stadium.
a bike that races around the country.
I want to be a bench on a forest trail.
When I grow up, I don't want to be a piece of garbage. And if you recycle me, I won't be.
Give your garbage another life. Recycle. Learn how at iwanttoberecycled.org. Brought to you by Keep America Beautiful and the Ad Council.
Coming to you from the heart of Manhattan, I'm Stephen Chalowitz, thanking you for staying with us here on the One Way Ticket Show. And to never miss an episode of our show, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. Just search for The One Way Ticket Show, or go to our site, theonewayticketshow.com, and sign up there to receive email updates for new episodes of the show. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, @TOWT Show is our handle. And if you want to show your love, go on iTunes and write us a nice review. Why don't you? And with that, we welcome back our very special guest, talk show host and author Dick Cavett, whose latest book, Brief Encounters, is now available in paperback, and with Christmas just around the corner, Brief Encounters makes a great stocking stuffer because it's small enough in paperback that you can fit in small stockings.
And not only that, it has blurbs by both Woody Allen, which is very worth reading, and another one by Mel Brooks.
And Jimmy Fallon.
And Jimmy Fallon wrote the intro in his unbusy life.
Because he's got nothing else to do.
He was doing everything to get into the horrendous world of putting a talk show together. It was just for the Tonight Show started.
But he was kind enough to write that
enough time
blurb.
To write that.
Anyway,
Mel Brooks said that it's the perfect bathroom reading because each piece is just the right length.
There you go. It depends how much time you spend in the bathroom, Dick.
I know. I don't want to know.
Now we know how much time Mel Brooks spends in the bathroom.
We know who his weakness is.
There you go. Listen, it's time for some audience questions on that highbrow note. The first one comes from Hillary in Astoria, Queens. And that's, of course...
isn't she busy campaigning?
I was going to say versus Hillary from Chappaqua.
Okay.
So let's get that one straight.
Yeah.
And she wrote, Dear Stephen, ask about David Bowie. And this is all a quote from Hillary from Astoria. When he interviewed him, it was from Hillary.
I don't know. Who's the person?
David Bowie.
Politician?
David Bowie. He had a little bit of a singing career.
Oh, that David Bowie.
David Bowie.
My dear friend Dave.
Yes. So she wrote, when he interviewed him, it was a big deal because people still didn't know what to think of him.
Yeah.
And mainstream media hadn't really interviewed him yet, at least not in the U.S. And by the way, I remember it was a fabulous interview. Once again, that's Hillary from Astoria versus Hillary from Chappaqua. And I have to say, after I got the question, Dick, I went back and I saw the interview on YouTube.
Suspecting I never had David Bowie on.
I just wanted to, as Reagan said, trust but verify.
Yeah.
Anyway, but what happened was I was looking at the interview, and I don't know if you remember this or not, but he had a black cane with him, and he was clutching
he
as a
rather
prop.
Caressed it and moved his fingers across it.
Exactly. And I
right.
thought to myself, he was clutching it, and he was stroking it. And the first thing that I thought was, a body language expert would really have a field day with this, because for me, that was like a security blanket for him.
Weak, probably.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, did you notice that as well?
Whenever guests are stroking their canes, I leap to that same sort of conclusion. Yeah, it was strange. And he did seem nervous. I don't know why he would be. He's a very likable guy. And I was glad to have him on. A number of people noticed that he sniffled a bit. And I wasn't hip enough to understand that right away. But I like Bowie. God, he's done some good stuff.
Yeah, he's had an amazing
career. The
career.
I confess I had forgotten until now. But now I can see it as he moved his hands both ways across it.
And I must say, I kept noticing what he was doing with the cane versus what he was saying, because it was so out there.
Symbolists had, as you just did, a great time with it.
Right. Anyway, next question comes from, we have two questions from my adopted hometown of Singapore. And the first one comes from listener and a friend, KF Sito, who is the big food guy out there. He has this whole industry called Makan Sutra. And in fact, remember the name KF Sito because he's doing a deal with Anthony Bourdain to open up a big eatery place here. So,
is this one about David Bowie, too?
It's not about David Bowie. It's a general question. It's a rather PG-13 question. And he asked, where did he look when a well-endowed subject had a low-cut day on his show? Now, I'm guessing he's talking about women.
Avril Harriman? No. Who would it be?
But he said,
that
where did you...
happened all the time.
He said, where did you look?
I had a breastfeeding on my show once.
Did you have...
Yeah. I won't say who it was because she was rather embarrassed about it later. Got somewhat out of her hippie phase that she was in at the time. And a splendid actress. But
were you looking at her eyes or were you looking somewhere else?
Guess.
Okay. We're going to go to the next question then from Singapore. This one comes from Eugenia. I like this question. What are the qualities in a person that captivate you, and who has them?
Oh, any number of people do. If they can talk well, if they have an interesting mind, if they have humor, if they have wit and are willing to be there and willing to contribute and not just sit like the clot pate who was the star of Zabriskie Point. He, good-looking guy, he and the lady lead of Zabriskie Point, and people can Google this because I can't remember their names, sat there like clods and curds and toads and reacted with monosyllables that sometimes weren't even intelligible. And at one point, the guy, male star of it, who had, by the way, earlier said, I said, well, shall I see this movie? I haven't seen it. And he said, oh, it's not so much. So you heard his PR people faint. And then he said, oh, I must add to this. There was a third person seated next to them, the aforementioned Mel Brooks. And he was growing exasperated, too, and saw my plight. And I said to the guy, or he said something like, so I walked over to this shelf and I picked up there was and Mel said, a bread box, something. One of the best laughs ever. But being able to talk, being willing to talk, being outrageous if necessary.
And who would you say just top of mind?
Gore Vidal.
Funny you should say Gore Vidal, because the next question comes from Bob from the Upper West Side. He said, ask Dick about the Gore Vidal-Norman Mailer interview. Huh. And the thing is, we could go on for an hour about that one, and I'd love to have you back. But what I have to say is, one of the things I loved about that interview was actually Janet Flanner.
Bless you for saying that.
I thought to myself, has anyone written a biopic?
Most people have said about it, either who was the great old lady in the middle. And she, to some astute people's mind, like yourself, virtually stole the show. Calm but beautiful manipulation and irritation of Norman.
And by the way, Dick, I have to show you in my notes here. She stole the show.
Oh, my God, that's right. We must have like minds. Janet Flanner, by the way, for years and years was the New Yorker's columnist who wrote the Paris column from Paris every week, under the pseudonym Genet. Of course, that's a playwright. And it was years after I'd met Janet Flanner that I realized Genet is Janet in its way. But she was wonderful, talking about her friendship with Hemingway and Gertrude Stein. But there was a favorite moment in that show, not the most memorable one that has now been placed on YouTube. I hate to have that excerpt of the high point of my nastiness to Norman, but it's fun to watch. But she said, you talk as if you were the only ones here. And Norman, who was pissed, said, aren't we the only ones here? She said, no, he's here, you're here, they're here, I'm here, and I'm growing very bored. And with her beautiful white-gloved hand, she threw a kiss to Norman. And he cut to Norman sourly sitting there, and the audience applauding. That show deserves to be seen by everybody. It's the damnedest show I ever
And it's
did.
in entirety.
Yeah, maybe it can.
Together
we can put it out.
I would love to, and I have to tell you, I would love someone to write like I said, a biopic about her. Just another couple of real quick questions.
Yeah.
Actually, I should say, no one this time wrote in about Katharine Hepburn, but in doing research for the show, I came across an interesting factoid that you had written about, that Katharine Hepburn never used Novocaine when she went to the dentist.
That is interesting. I remember reading that in TV Guide. I couldn't understand it. I hate the dentist's injections. Everybody does, I think, especially in the roof of the mouth. But I thought, damn it, I'm as good a man as Katharine Hepburn is. I'm going to not use Novocaine from now on. Later, somebody said, and I'd forgotten saying this, something you said about Novocaine I'll never forget. And I thought they were going to say Katharine Hepburn. You said, no, at one point in your life you were eager to get the painful shot because you were in depression and wanted to feel something.
That's powerful. That's very powerful. And by the way, on Katharine Hepburn, one of our previous guests, the TV, film, Broadway producer Howard Rosenman, actually was Miss Hepburn's assistant when she was on Broadway.
No
and told
kidding.
we had him on the show, and he told the most charming story about he was sick one day and didn't show up for work, and Katharine Hepburn brought
Came
him
over with her medical kit.
brought him chicken soup.
Oh, yeah.
So there you go. We have just enough time for just one or two real quick ones.
That's terrible.
Dick, we're going to have you back anyway. We're going to do this until we get it right. How's
Okay.
that?
Shouldn't take.
No, but we're going to have you back. But then let me just close then on this one, and that's I got a number of people saying, ask about John and Yoko. So the one pointed question I'm just going to ask, though, is, and I hate to end on a rather melancholy note, but where were you when John Lennon was shot?
I think I heard it on a cab radio or somebody's car radio. And I thought, oh, hell, I suppose that was inevitable. But it killed me. I just hated it. And every time you walk by the Dakota, a foreign tourist will say, where was John standing when he was shot? And you point out to. Speaking of shot, quickly, one tweet I did recently. Horrible nightmare, it starts. I dreamed I was a Chicago policeman, and I feared for my life. A young black man was walking away from me. But I've gotten a lot of reaction from that one. Carol Burnett said it's both believable and funny and very sad. So anybody who's seen that footage of the cop drilling the poor guy from behind will probably never forget it. Interesting how the social media has, in a way, with its cameras in the police cars and other things, made it a little harder for certain cops to shoot people dead.
My big question was, why did they wait so long to release
That's too
it?
big. I want the whole story on that.
I
year.
don't understand.
Was somebody, some individual, keeping it quiet?
And why and who? And I mean, there's so
Scandalous.
many unanswered questions.
And how many times do you think that's happened when we never found out?
That's the thing. That's the scary part. Dick,
Yeah.
I was hoping we wouldn't end on a melancholy note, so I'm not going to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read something, speaking of Jimmy Fallon, on the back of another one of your books, not on Brief Encounters, but on
Talk Show?
He wrote, and I quote here, after reading Talk Show, you could just imagine what a conversation with him, meaning you, would be like. Pleasant, insightful, and oddly erotic. Dick Cavett is a legend and an inspiration. Unquote. That's from Jimmy Fallon. I have to say, I agree with every one of those things. I don't understand the oddly erotic part. So Jimmy has some splaining to do.
Well, with enough exposure to me, you will.
Okay. Maybe after the third time, who knows?
Yeah.
Dick, this has been
Why do
so
you think
much
I'm
fun.
wearing this Napoleon hat?
All right, this is your Waterloo, and we want to thank you, Dick, really, for coming out on a rainy day on Woody Allen's birthday, no less. Once again, this is December 1st, Woody Allen's 80th birthday, totally unplanned.
He won't want to be reminded of that. My anagram gift, who I realized after I had Spiro Agnew on that grow a penis is an anagram for his name. He was the dullest guest. I don't want to say who the dullest guest I ever had was, but his initials are S.A., Spiro Agnew.
Dick,
but
we're
I
gonna...
made up for it with Alec Guinness, his Genuine Class. That's pretty good.
Oh, that's a good one.
And it came
How about
instantly. It's a strange aberration.
What's Dick Cavett?
I've never tried that. It doesn't anagram very well. Gore Vidal has the right combination of vowels and consonants, so you get rival doge and gad I love her and I love drag, and it just goes. In a book he did, he somehow found a folder in my home where I had done 25 anagrams of his name, and I don't know how he got it, photographed it, and he put it in the book.
Did he think you were stalking him or something?
No, but Gore liked anything that had to do with himself. The new biography of him is called Empire of Self, is a gem. He once said about Ted Kennedy in his rather vicious, bitchy way, when Ted Kennedy was gaining a good deal of weight and drinking a lot, neither of which was a secret he could keep. And he said, the senator is beginning to resemble nothing so much as 300 pounds of condemned veal. You could almost call that bitchy.
I think so. So on that note, then, Dick, we're going to leave it at that. This
You're
has
having
been
trouble ending this.
But that's okay. We're having a great time. Your chariot awaits. Your chariot awaits downstairs. So we're going to have you back. But really,
We've started the next show.
We've started the next show with anagrams.
Yeah.
We're going to have to do some anagrams next time.
Everybody's favorite thing.
I love anagrams. Listen, thanks again for coming aboard the One Way Ticket Show. And just want to let our listeners know, if you want to learn more about Dick, just log on to dickcavettshow.com. Don't forget his book, Brief Encounters, is now in paperback, makes a great Christmas gift. Or you can spring for the hardcover version, as I did. It's worth every penny.
And thank you for not embarrassingly plugging the DVDs that are available on Amazon.
And their DVDs on Amazon, which also make great stocking stuffers. You can get the books at fine bookstores near you or on Amazon. I prefer shopping at a bookstore myself. That's where I ran into Dick, actually, at Barnes & Noble for the first time.
That's so funny.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
There's also info about Dick on our website, theonewayticketshow.com. And as I said before, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter for news about Dick and all of our other fantastic, I don't even know what the right word is for you, Dick, all of our other engaging guests, perhaps?
That's okay. And by the way, you're awfully good at that. At this.
Thank you. I appreciate
In fact, you're
that.
the best host that I ran into in Barnes & Noble ever. But seriously, folks, this guy's got it.
Can I quote you on that, Dick?
Oh, no, that'll cost you.
Uh-oh. I'll have to buy a lot of books then, too. Yeah. Anyway, and to never miss an episode, download our podcast from iTunes, search for The One Way Ticket Show, or go to our site, theonewayticketshow.com. Sign up there to receive email updates for new episodes of the show. We will be doing another one with Dick, and so listen out for that. And with that, it's a wrap for this edition of The One Way Ticket Show. For Dick Cavett, I'm Stephen Chalowitz, and for the entire crew, we'll see you next time.
Maybe like certain cheap comics, we should end singing, "When You're Smiling."